Hi everyone, this is Yana Smakula and thank you for joining me for another Altenew video tutorial. Today we're going to talk a bit about creating geometric backgrounds using individual stamps. We're also going to do some masking and we'll learn how to incorporate floral images into modern cards with geometric patterns. I will also share one of my newest ideas in terms of gold embossing. We have a lot to cover in this video, so let's get started. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the products that I will be using to create today's project. So first of all, I have this Sohcahtoa stamp set with some awesome triangles. You have your outline and solid triangles and also some striped ones. I've been dying to use this stamp set to create a background for a card for a long time, and I finally have. Next up, I have a superscript stamp set, and I'll be using this one for my main sentiment, and also a many thanks stamp set that I will use to create a secondary sentiment. I also have vintage roses here. Of course, no one can resist those gorgeous flowers, and neither can I. I will be using those to dress up my geometric pattern and make my card a little bit more feminine and girly. As for the inks, I plan to use Warm Sunshine, Frayed Leaf, and Coral Berry for the background, and also a lighter yellow buttercream ink for the roses, and a darker green Forest Glades for the leaves. I plan to use a third green color, the darkest one, for the leaves, but I thought it would be a little bit too dark for this project, so I skipped it in the end. Before we can do any stamping, we need to create a mask for our card. I'm going to use a circle die from Spellbinders. This one is about 2.5 inches across, and I'm going to create a circle mask out of thin printer paper. You can also use masking paper for this if you have any. I don't. I never buy it for some reason, so I'm just going to use thin printer paper. If you've never done masking before, it's vital to use something thin for your mask. Think something like a post-it note, printer paper, or specialty masking paper. After you have your mask ready, go ahead and attach it onto your base panel or your card base. I will be doing a lot of heat embossing today, and I know that my cardstock will warp, so I'm not making a one-layer card. However, if you choose to skip the heat embossing, you can easily turn this into a one-layer project. So I'm placing my mask on my base panel, somewhere closer to the top, and using grid lines on my cutting mat to help align the mask. For my background, I'm going to use a tall triangle stamp from the Sohcahtoa stamp set, and I'm starting with a solid triangle. I'm going to build my background or my pattern from scratch. I'm using 3 colors of ink, and I will be repeating those as I'm stamping my background and cleaning my stamp after each impression to avoid mixing colors. So I'm stamping the first triangle, overlapping my mask. I want to make sure to define the edges of the mask as nicely, I guess, as possible, so this is why I'm starting here. Now, if you don't like masking, you can skip the whole masking part, stamp the entire background, and just add a die-cut circle on top. That would be much easier. But I wanted to keep the number of layers on this card to a minimum, so this is why I masked the area in the center to avoid having to add another layer to this card. This is simply a matter of preference here. Now, I'm using inks by Altenew, and there's a specific reason why I chose those inks. And the reason is they do not stain stamps. They stain them just a teeny tiny bit, so I'm able to see through my stamps and align my stamped images much better, and I don't even have to create a grid for myself to be able to stamp this pattern. Obviously, this can be done using other inks, but Altenew inks are just the best for this. Okay, so I'm stamping my triangles and I'm alternating the colors, and I'm trying to make my pattern appear somewhat random. I'm using only 3 colors of ink, as I find that 3 is enough for the triangle of this size. But if you are using a smaller triangle, you can try to add more colors to this background pattern, maybe a lighter yellow and also a lighter pink. After I finished stamping this background, I removed the mask to check if I liked everything, and I have to say I was very happy with the way this pattern turned out. For now, I just need to set it aside and let the ink dry. Not to waste any time, I'm going to multitask and work on my roses now. I'm not going to do a detailed tutorial on how to stamp these, as there are quite a few of those on Altenew YouTube channel, so if you haven't seen them yet, be sure to check them out. I'm only going to use 2 colors of ink to stamp the first and the second layer of my roses, a light yellow and a medium yellow, and for the third layer I'm going to do something completely different, something I've never done before and only thought about today as I was getting ready to film this video. So I'm stamping my roses and also stamping 2 layers for my leaves, once again using a light and a medium ink, and also setting this piece of paper aside to dry. Now let's go back to our geometric pattern. What I'm going to do now is use an identical outline triangle and stamp outlines on some of my triangles in the background using clear sticky ink, and heat emboss those outlines using gold embossing powder. If you've been watching my videos lately, you know that I love gold and I often use it on my projects. So I'm going to use my heat tool and dry this ink some more. I need to make sure it's completely dry before I can do my gold outlining. I'm using an anti-static powder pouch to prep the surface for heat embossing. What this does is it helps to keep the embossing nice and clean and prevents embossing powder particles from sticking everywhere where they're not supposed to stick to. Next, I'm using an outline stamp, inking it up using clear sticky ink and stamping on top of my previously stamped triangles on my background. Sorry I had to crop a lot of the things out as my head was getting in the way all the time as I was trying to align everything perfectly. So next, add your embossing powder and keep repeating stamping outlines on top of some of the triangles. You certainly do not want all the triangles to have a gold outline, just some of them. This will help with that random pattern look that we're going for here. And be sure to have that circle mask on as you're doing this. And voila! Our background pattern is now ready. You have your triangles stamped in 3 colors and you also have your gold outline. Looks very beautiful and kind of trendy too. So it's time to go back to our roses and add that 3rd layer to the flowers and to the leaves. So instead of using a 3rd color of ink, a darker ink, I decided I wanted to do something completely different this time. I wanted to add embossing powder. So obviously I went with gold, and now I'm thinking platinum or white would also look very pretty on those. So again, I'm prepping the paper for heat embossing using the 3rd layer stamp, inking it up using clear sticky ink and stamping on top of the 2 previously stamped layers. Adding gold embossing powder on top, and here we have a gorgeous one-of-a-kind yellow rose. Don't you just love the way it looks? Absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to have to make lots more cards using these roses now that I know that I can heat emboss the top layer. It just gives these flowers a whole new look. So I'm doing the same procedure for the rest of the roses and the leaves, and then die cutting all of these using matching vintage rose dies. The next step is to create a sentiment for this card. I'm going to heat emboss a large, bold thanks, once again using gold embossing powder. I'm going to place this sentiment at an angle as I really do not want it to go just straight across. Placing it at an angle also adds a little bit of movement and dynamics to my card. Now my background warped a little bit from all the heat embossing, so I had to find a way to flatten this piece. I used to adhere layers of cardstock to the opposite side of my paper, but ever since Jennifer Maguire shared her trick for using craft foam to add dimension to cards, I've been adding a layer of white foam to the back of my heat embossed panels to help flatten them. And this is what I did here, and it really helped. Now this card already looks awesome as is, and I know a lot of people like a clean and graphic look like this one here, but I decided to take this project a step further and add a little bit of a creative mask on top. So I'm putting my circle mask back on to protect the sentiment area and adding drops of black ink. I'm using a small paintbrush, dipping it into my spray ink bottle and tapping on it with my finger to add teeny tiny little drops of black ink. The ink that I'm using is a very old one and I've had it for ages, and I'm only using it for purposes like this. If you think black is a little bit too distracting for this card, I think gold would also look nice. Thankfully, I don't have a gold spray ink, otherwise I would have definitely added it onto my card and would have ended up having way too much gold here. Now I can finally go ahead and adhere this panel onto my card base and add the die-cut flowers and leaves. I also created an additional sentiment, a thank you one, using black ink. I felt I needed to have a contrasting element against my background, and this little piece was a perfect match. Finally, I added a few peach enamel dots and a little bit of gold thread to complete this card. And here's one final look at this project. You can see the fun masked and stamped geometric background, heat embossed sentiment, 2-tone roses and leaves with the gold heat embossing and the drops of black ink. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below or in the blog post. If you liked this video and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel for more inspiration. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!